Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Mindful Session. My name is Unisa Camara, and I'm the host of the show. And I have my co-host, David Slate, which indeed he will come in a bit. But today in the studio, I have the pleasure of having a very good friend of mine. He and I had done, an event together, which indeed I felt as though we need to have him on the show. He needs to spread his message. He has a purpose. And one thing that he believes in is that people have the right to thrive. People have the right to be seen. People have the right to be heard. And I would love to basically introduce this gentleman, but I will give him the opportunity to introduce himself, and then David will come in. This gentleman's name is Gary Turner. Gary, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for the invitation. Very excited to be with you.
Oh, it's a pleasure, Gary. Gary, before we bring David in, please tell us a little bit about Gary Turner.
How long have you got, Unisa? Excuse me. So, the reason we found each other, thanks to Barkay, really is the summary of my journey so far, Unisar, over the last 43 years, which is, I believe I'm now at a stage where I'm here to help catalyze human connection, to bring people together so they can learn, share, and grow in community, regardless of the color of their skin, where they come from, or how they identify. And I believe that that's what I'm here to do, and that's taken 43 years to work out.
Wow. So Gary don't see the color of the skin. He sees us as all human beings. We bleed the same, we feel the same pain. So he don't believe in that separation or whatever. But we are going to go so much in depth about Gary, and we are going to take on his purpose, his passion, what it is that thrives, what he's striving, what it is that he craves, what he expects out of a human being, his expectations of self, most importantly. So, and also we have our co-host, David, who is not with us today, but he's joining us via Zoom. David, welcome to the show.
Hi everyone, good afternoon. Hi Gary. I am in Edinburgh at the moment, and I am thankful for the team here at Art Italia that have up the connection so that we can be in session. So thanks to everyone here at Art Italia. Looking forward to the conversation with Gary on Humane and what that means in the world as we go through COVID.
David, your network is not as good as we expect, but as usual, it's an open forum. But David is somewhere in no man's land, as usual. So Gary, I know you have a passion. I know you want to make a change. Now, Gary has a podcast called The Value Through Vulnerability. In America, we say value through, vulnerability. Our pronunciation and the UK's pronunciation is a bit different. So excuse me. The essence of us here is try to convey a message to our viewers. And your message is so strong. What your passion is. What made you develop this podcast, Value Through Vulnerability?
Thanks for the question, Unis. For me, it was back in February of 2018.
Okay.
And I was at the stage of my own personal development
Okay.
where I couldn't find the quality content. I couldn't find the conversations about being human, which sounds crazy in 2020.
Right.
But I was looking for conversations about how can we show up more fully as a whole human being? How can we have difficult conversations? What are the skills that we need as human beings to navigate rapid change?
Right.
And I just couldn't find the content. So I thought I'll set something up and see if that helps.
Okay. And thank you for having me on that, Being Humane podcast. Now, how is that going? What development, what changes have you seen through all of this podcast?
It's really interesting because it's really a passion project. So it's really started, the podcast was just a means for me to have great conversations with great human beings. But also then if we can reach, and I know you share this passion, Unisar, if we can reach just one human being, challenge their thinking, give them the space to reflect, maybe challenge a belief they've been holding on to for 40 years, then it's been worthwhile. So it's really a podcast of service. It's really out there to create a safe space, because we've not been brought up, we've not been educated to talk about emotion, feelings, vulnerability, courage. So what the real aim is really a safe space for other people to listen in and hopefully see themselves in the conversations, and hopefully build some confidence that allows you then to step into your power more fully.
Okay. See, David, please feel free to intercede at any time. The thing about Gary is that you and him share so much in common, and I as well. And that's what makes this little gathering, us being together. The world has a way of bringing people together. Now, Gary, you don't mind me going into it a little bit?
Sure.
Gary was bullied at the age of 12 and 13. He did, self-harming while he was at university. And, he went to the dance thing hard. And I think that's what drove Gary to where the passion that he has today, trying to help people. So tell us about this, about the whole self-harming thing, the bullying aspect. How did you escape that? How did you find the true Gary? How were you able to stand up and say, this cannot be happening to me, Gary?
So I want to frame it in that from a personal point of view, I had a very privileged upbringing, great family, great friends, great education system, Western life. So all of that was great. So from a personal point of view, everything was sorted. However, what happened with the bullying is that I didn't have the emotional maturity to realize that I was holding on to emotion, that I was afraid, that I was a bit fearful of the next beating or the next group of young boys sort of beating me up, which is what happened. So the experience was repeated bullying, both psychologically, but also physically, over a period of 2 years.
Right.
So what I did is that, because I didn't know how to ask for help, and I didn't know how to say that it's a bit scary or I'm a bit afraid, I just held on to that. And what I did then over the next 25 years, again, had a very good life. I've been very successful based on societal versions of what success looks like. So I've had a great life. But what I realized at the age of 39 was that I'd been holding on to this frustration. And what my coach helped me, Unisar, back in, actually it's February 2018.
Right.
She held up the mirror to all of these experiences. So the self-harm, the bullying. I then burnt myself out about 4 years ago by overthinking my way into a burnout. And what that was, she said it was emotional suppression. So what happened was I had all these peaks, had a very good life there, but I was suppressing emotion. I wasn't feeling those experiences.
So you're going through a roller coaster, basically.
Exactly. And to answer your question, what happened? I let go of that. Once I had those coaching sessions, I realized I didn't need to hold those experiences in my head anymore. It's almost overnight, it just dissipated. It was incredible.
See, psychologically speaking, again, David, please feel free to intercede, come in at any given time. Psychologically speaking, we tend to suppress a lot of our emotions, through fear. And it's hard for us to let go. And you stated that you had to go through someone that was working for Apple, the executive of Apple, that mentored you. So how did you go about finding this individual? Because there are so many different mentors out there. What is it specifically about this individual?
So I'll just call her name if that's okay.
Please.
So her name is Nilofer Merchant, and she's an ex-chief of marketing at Apple. And why she was so transformational in my growth over the last few years is she wrote a book called Onlyness.
Okay.
And it's basically what she speaks about is the spot in the world that only you stand. Yeah, that's the only spot that we have. So for me, it was this realization that the bullied Gary, the happy Gary, the clubbing Gary, the grateful Gary, the successful businessman Gary, all of those parts of me are what make Gary up as a whole person. So what she helped me see and sense into and feel and realize was actually the best version of me is all of me, good, bad, warts and all, black, dark. And when we bring that all together, we can then move forward in a really powerful way.
Wow. Wow. Gary, another thing that caught my attention about you is the passion that you share for human beings, regardless of race, age, or whatever have you. When Floyd got killed, was murdered, literally murdered, tell us your emotions, how you were feeling, how you expressed yourself.
Well, my podcast is called Value Through Vulnerability, so let's go there.
Let's do go there.
Yeah, so I've not shared on a platform like yours this clarity. So as I've shared with you before, Unisar, I literally cried for 2 days on and off. I had an internal emotional connection to the murder of George Floyd. And I know that George isn't the first black male to have been murdered at the hands of services or just murdered full stop. But something happened within me this time that I was emotionally impacted for about 2 or 3 days. Just I'd be walking down the street, I'd be listening to a podcast, I'd suddenly just well up, I'd just start having tears linked to that tragic act. And what that did, it really just, it fueled me to say, what can I do as Gary to try and better understand what's gone before, acknowledge, empathize with the past, because we need to do that. There's healing that we all need to do collectively as the singular human race that we are. What can I do in my own small way to help that? And that's where you kindly joined us on the Truly Human conversation previously.
Well, it was a pleasure being on there. Even though I started running my mouth more than expected. But, so the whole root of value through vulnerability, give us the root of it. Make us understand a little bit more. I know I asked you a little bit more, but I know there's so much more to it, Gary.
There is more to it. I think if we think of the workspace, try and keep it relevant for all of your viewers as well, it really comes back to this living as whole human beings. And my belief and my experience over the last 2.5 years since running the podcast, speaking to CEOs, coaches, senior leaders, independent consultants from different hues, backgrounds, disabilities, so a really intentionally diverse background. It's the same stories, Unisar. How do we connect better as a human level? How do we learn to have role model courage? How do we have difficult conversations? How do I show a bit more of my true self so that you can do the same? We're going through this tragic COVID-19 virus right now. The irony is, vulnerability is a positive contagion. The more that we role model vulnerability, it invites others to do the same. And I've experienced that time and time and time again. And that's the fuel behind the podcast, is I know that we're reaching people. And I don't need to know this, but I know it from third party and fourth party, and from conversations I'm having, that people just open up. It's like a flower. Like we're like this compressed flower with our emotions so much of the time. I was. Yeah. But as we role model vulnerability and can share our story and connect with others, that flower opens up and we start living as a whole person. Well, that's been my experience anyway, and that's what the podcast is here to do.
Well, I'm so grateful for this podcast, and when I was on it. It was a pleasure. You know, the thing about vulnerability is, unfortunately, society has taught not to be biased, sexist, or whatever have you, but men has to portray a certain role. We have to hold certain things in. We're not to cry. We're not to do this. We're not to do that. And you come along and say, you know what? Don't listen to what you have known all these years. Be you. That's that's a huge movement. That's someone has to have the courage to want to come out and encourage men to open up. Why this path, Gary? I know what you've been through, but why would you want to take up on such a challenge?
Because if I want to be really, if I want to go existential on this,
please,
we won't be here in 100 years as a human race.
That is a fact.
You know, if we carry on with the way we are, with the way we lead governments, the way we lead our family groups, the way we lead organizations, if we don't have these conversations more often that you and I and David are having, openly, transparently, with care, with empathy, with support, with love, we won't be here in 100 years. I just genuinely believe that, because it's just too polarized. And these conversations, human conversations like you and I are having, are the glue that allow us to come together, regardless of how we identify, the color of our skin, to have safe conversations and then co-create better. Because it's not about you, me, or David. It's about every single one of us being part of this conversation and stepping in with vulnerability, because I believe it can change the world for the better. I truly do. And
the thing about you, Gary, that also like opens up, David, please feel free to intercede at any time. The thing that also opened me up about Gary is the fact that Gary just don't say, okay, my focus is just on society. Gary actually goes to companies and talk to companies on a one-to-one base or do sessions with actual companies. So he don't just he believe in the workplace environment, rectifying situations that are wrong, making them right. Is that so?
That's the grounding of the work. It is, and you know, and I'd love to hear from David. But I think the word that one of my colleagues, one of my friends, Arlene, shared with me as recently as yesterday. What she shared with me yesterday, she said, Gary, I think you're here to help healing. Like everything that you speak to, the book you're writing, the podcast you do, the work you do, you're here to try and help the healing. And I was just like, wow, I think you're right. And I'm still feeling into that. That was yesterday. And it's
she is right.
I was just like, wow, I just didn't see it that way.
David, we cannot hear you. Okay.
One of the things that kind of strikes out from everything that Gary's been talking about this afternoon is self-awareness. That rise of self-awareness that you had from those conversations with that coach allowed everything else to kind of fall into place. And you said something else that really struck with me as well. That right at the very beginning, the sense of we don't talk about how we feel, we talk about how we think. And we don't give ourselves that time to explore what we're feeling. We just keep reacting to what we think.
To what we know.
And that treadmill of reaction after reaction after reaction just keeps us away from dealing with what we actually felt in the first place.
That resonates so much, David. It resonates so much, and I think it's a great spot, because one of the things that happened with that coach back in February 2018 is I invested in myself for the first time. Previously, I was one of the guys that worked in a corporation and expected the company to pay for my investment. Like, I'll do that investment once they pay for it. As soon as I got that mindset of actually, it's on me to develop me and to be the best version of me, it all shifted. So I think it's a really great spot, David, around that. That investing in myself was definitely a big catalyst.
See,
I mean, Unisa and I have done.
David, go ahead. Unisa and I have done numerous shows on anxiety. Go ahead, depression.
We've done heaps of shows, and what strikes me week after week after week is the power of self-awareness. And we were joined really early on in the series by Siobhan, who talks about the VC method and how having that feeling ahead of the thought allows all of the actions following any kind of event to fall into place. And everything that we see week after week after week, it reinforces that same concept that we have to get to a point where we are dealing with what we feel about the situation rather than what we think about the situation. And in the corporate arena, it's vital that everyone is empowered to have that rather than waiting for the company to deliver it.
Okay. Basically, the whole essence of this is that, Gary, you have walked through your path. As you always say, no one can walk through your path. And everything that you've been through have led you to where you are. And you have decided to write a book. Tell us about your book.
Thanks for that invitation. The book's called Change is an Inside Job. And it may or may not be a surprise. But the book really is it's a personal development book that's aimed at you. It's there to support you, to allow you to see yourself in the story. So I shared some of my life journey with Unisar, with you, with David today. But I'm just one story. I'm really grateful to have been joined by 30 other amazing human beings that have shared their lived experience with me. So CEOs of companies, consultants, leaders within organizations. And really what I'm trying to achieve with the book is a safe space again in that book for people to see themselves in the story. Okay? What I mean by that, Unisar, is I do talk about privilege. I do talk about awareness. I do talk about the fact that everything is connected. And then I bring that to life through the storytelling of the experience of other people. Because science is important to validate things, but we're far more intuitive and creative innately than we give ourselves credit for. And what I want to do is use this book as a vehicle to allow people to see that there's so much more potential within them already, and we just need to get out of our own way to release that.
That's excellent. So when will this book be available?
Right, there's a challenge now. So I'm going to be vulnerable again, Unisar. So the book project really stalled after the murder of George Floyd. So what actually happened for me is the book was very, as I just described to you, it's very clear, a very clear trajectory, very clear mission of the book. But following the murder of George Floyd, I got inside my head about, should it be more about race? Like, I already had privilege in there, I already had connection in there, and I just got inside my head massively about the fact that maybe it should be a book about race. And then I was like, who am I to write a race book as the white guy? So I just got really confused in my head about what the book was about. But I'm back on track, and I believe that the book will be written by the end of the summer. So I hope it will be out early next year. So please, accountability partners out there, do challenge me, because I'll need your help to make sure it happens.
Well, please, when you do release the book, let us know, or I'll come back on.
Thank you.
See, another aspect of it is that something you overcoming is the fact that, well, you overcame. You surpassed it, the bullying aspect. A lot of people, when they were bullied or are being bullied, they tend to become bullies themselves. And you went through this whole psychological phase, this whole phase of saying, well, you know what, I'm not going to be who they think I'm going to be. I'm not going to repeat what I've been through onto others through the help of your coach. So what gave you the strength? Because some people go through these therapies for so many years and deep down still have that anger. You don't come across to me as someone that have any kind of anger in within them. You look so serene in within yourself.
It's a really interesting question because I never really felt that way. I never ever had the energy to want to bully other kids, or to bully other kids then, or to bully other people. And one of the part for my own personal healing and journey over the last couple of years has been forgiveness.
Wow.
So it's actually, I did do the thing about 18 months ago, Unisar, when I went on to LinkedIn, just curiosity, like, because I remember the guy's name, like, where is he now? And this guy, the guy that led the bullying, which is a white guy, by the way, so it was white on white bullying in West Wales, and he's a senior VP of a apparel manufacturer in Singapore, very senior guy now. And I just looked at his profile and I was like, well done.
Wow.
Well done for your success. And part of me wants to message you, but why would I be messaging him, really? And I decided seeing his face, seeing his profile was enough for me just to go, it's okay. He would have been hurting. This is where my mindset got to now. Like, that guy did not bully me because he wanted to bully me. He bullied me because he was hurting.
Precisely.
And I think, what do we look around the world right now? People are just reacting based on being fear. Just fear reactions all over the world. Instead of empathizing and realizing those people are in fear, it's like fear on fear on fear on fear. Instead of breathe, get present, what's going on for you? What's going on for you? Let's come together and understand what we're experiencing. Like, we can turn this world on a dime if we can just do that more. I truly believe that.
David, is there anything you want to say? Because the way you think, Gary, people normally say think out the box. And you tend to not even think out the box. You tend to think you're not in the box. You're able to think the whole 360. But a lot of people, because of the fear they have, that they're afraid to lose control, they try to keep that fear in place. How are you able to, I was bullied, but I turned it around at an early stage as to say, I need to learn how to fight. My parents put me into different, activities, and I overcame that, and I started believing in the underdog. Because I did not want people to go through what I was going. Kids were taking my lunch money. After school, I had to stay in the building till all the kids left. So sometimes it depends on your mind. And like you said, you came from a loving home. So you had that support initially. And that's what support us. But it's not everybody that have that support. If you can give advice to someone right now that is going through this kind of bullying, what would you say to them?
So there'd be two things I would share with you. One is the feeling and the process of bullying is not your fault. It does not impact your self-worth. You are still worthy. 10 out of 10. Don't question your worthiness. It's not about you. Bullying's about them and what's going on in their mind. And secondly, connect with people that don't look like you or sound like you. This has been one of my biggest learnings. Build your tribe, build your network, no matter whether you're a child, an adult, or in the workplace. Build intentionally diverse communities around you that you can lean on at a time of need. That'd be my two key things, Unisar.
The thing about life, Gary, is I feel as though we all handle situations differently. If I'm I was bullied, but I have a big mouth, and I still have a big mouth. My big mouth came from A-high, as they would say. But you found, that kind of inner peace at an early stage. But some people tend to isolate themselves from society because they're being bullied. and they feel as though they cannot deal with other people. What would you say to those young kids or even adults? Because there are people right now at their workplaces. I'm dealing with this young lady, was dealing with this young lady, and she did not want to go to work, but she had to go to work to survive. And when she goes to work, she feels as though nobody acknowledges her, and the men used to make a mockery of her. What would you say to this young lady? Because I know she's watching.
I want to take a moment. I don't just want to give an impulsive reaction.
No, please.
So I'd like to take a moment just to think on that, because I've also been directed to that woman. I've been bullied in the workplace as well. And that was part of the reason that I burnt myself out. I overthought my way into that. So I empathise fully with your situation. What I found was helpful for me, again, was the out of work community. So who is your network? Where do you spend your time outside of your day job? I fully empathise with the difficulties at work. But first of all, who are the people that you spend time with outside of that workplace that lift you up, that make you feel positive, that you feel you're making a contribution towards? So really, who's that network, and spend more time there. But in terms of the workplace, are there any allies? Is there one or two people? Is there someone else in the business that you can maybe leverage? Yeah, it might not be your line manager. It could be someone else completely in a different part of the business. But who can you potentially try and connect with that can be your mouthpiece to try and get this message through to the powers that be? That isn't those men, or isn't your direct line manager. You know, who else? So really what I'm talking about in summary here, Unisan, it's so important for all of these things. What is your personal and workplace network? How diverse is that? Who can you talk to? Do you know people in different roles, different functions, different organizations? Like, that's the critical bit to all of this, because the more you build those networks out, personally and professionally, this stuff is much easier to navigate, because you'll have those people to act as advisors for you.
Right. See, also the thing is, I do definitely understand that, because David and I have spoken about, the team you build around you, will uplift you. You need to know what it is that you want, what you need, and that's the team you build around you. But what this young lady used to indicate, try to convey, try to pass on to me, try to tell me, was the fact that she did not have a social life.
Okay.
She used to go to work, do her job, go through the bullying or whatever it is that she was going through, and go home alone and sit in her flat.
Right.
Watch TV, read books, play with her cat. And the next day she has to repeat the whole process. That's how a lot of people commit suicide.
Yes.
That's where depression kicks in. That's where anxiety kicks in. That's where so many other illnesses that I can sit here and list kicks in. How can we empower? Because the reason why I've never had anyone on this show, David and I never had anyone on this show that we can ask these questions to. But because of the kind of person you are, I feel as though we can talk about this because of the kind of heart you have, your passion. How can we show these people love? What can we say to them? How can we open them up? I also have the toll-free number on my website, www.unisacamara.com. If you go on there's a toll-free number. I'll always indicate. Feel free to call. These people don't know who you are. You don't need to give your real name. If you just need someone to listen to you, please reach out. There's always support. And Gary's podcast, believe you me, will make a difference in your life. And just a pleasure. But please go ahead and respond, Gary.
It's tough. It's tough. I want to give a silver bullet or a sort of a succinct answer, but I think it is that self-awareness piece. I'll come back to what David spoke about earlier on. It's realizing It's realizing that we do, and I'd be interested in David's thoughts here, but there is a very fine line. I call it the tightrope of human experience. So like at any one moment in time, we can be in terrifying fear or absolute joy. And it's getting used to the experiences that create both of those for you. So becoming aware of what gives me joy, what is frustrating, what makes me sad, what makes me angry. So for that particular person, I can only imagine how challenging and difficult that is. But really get on your personal development journey. Start by itemizing and understanding what do you like, what do you love, what do you dislike, what do you want to be in the future. Really see yourself as a vessel for the next best version of you. So although it's horrible right now, it's scary, it's a horrible experience, what can you do right now to take baby steps towards the future version of you? But to get there, you need to decide what that looks like. And I think that would be a helpful guiding light for that person to be able to at least start to build baby steps. So I would invite you to listen to some of the podcasts, reach out to me as well. I love that you've got a toll-free number. If I can hold space for you for an hour, whoever that person is, Unisar, please get in touch with me. I'd love to hold space for that person.
Please give out the details to the podcast.
Yeah, so the podcast is Value Through Vulnerability. You can find that on all of the podcast platforms, including Apple. And you can find my website, garyturner.life, GARRYTURNER, one word, .LIFE. All my details are there. Please reach out to me. I'll speak with you in confidence, and I'll just hold space for you. You don't need fixing. You're a great human being, but we can help you put in place some new steps to step into your power.
I have to smile. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the Mindful Session. We don't believe in negativity. We believe in the aspect of positivity. We believe in us being as one. We come together to give you productive information, something to support you, and that is what we're here to do. Gary personally is the hardest man to catch, and he gave his time to be here and for him to give you the support you need. Ladies and gentlemen, Gary has been through so much, and he's willing to give himself. So I applaud you, Gary, for the journey that you've been through and that you're going through, and the changes that you're making and willing to support others. Because the podcast Value Through Vulnerability is quite huge. It's quite huge. And so many of us have so much courage, but so many people are sheeps. They just follow. But you decide to stand out to make a difference. And in the beginning of the show, I don't know if David is still on. David? Okay. In the beginning of the show, Gary, I asked you to tell us a little bit about yourself. And you did, but there's so much that I know I want you to tell all these, viewers that we have. But while you're processing that, how did you meet Mike Vacanti?
That's very kind of you to shout out, Mike. So Mike Vacanti is the founder of the Humans First community. Glad that Unisar is part of the community as well, and many of our friends. In fact, I met Unisar because of Barke Camus, who is part of the Humans First community. So Mike Vacanti founded that movement around 2 years ago, and it's a global movement of change makers, open hearts, open minds, and if you don't mind me saying, like every one of you is welcome to join the calls. There are calls every Monday, UK time. There's calls for Asian time. There's calls US time. Completely free of charge. Just requires an investment in your soul. But it's completely free of charge. And we met around 18 months ago via some of my network. And we've just had an incredible relationship building out this movement of open hearts and open minds. And in fact, it was fun yesterday, Unisar, because Gary Ridge is the CEO of, WD-40 with the lubricant can. So Gary Ridge was on the Humans First call yesterday.
Okay.
And Gary Ridge is also one of the 30 people that was interviewed for my book that's coming out.
That's excellent. So how did you come in contact with Mike?
So it's as everything. Everything's connected, yeah?
That is it.
Everything
I definitely believe
everything
that.
is connected. So I actually ran an online summit called Have Courage
Okay.
back in February of 2019. And if I may, it's completely free. So I've actually pulled together a free ebook which has insights from every one of the 23 leaders. So if your community would like a copy of that, it's completely free of charge.
Okay,
and again,
give us the website, please.
So it's actually on a Visme link. So what I'll do is you can find a link to that on my garyturner.life website. If you go on there, you'll be able to download the Have Courage free ebook.
Okay.
And I met a lady called Kimberly Davis, who's an amazing human being, does a lot of work around bravery. We should get her on your show, based in the US.
We'll look her up.
And she introduced me to a guy called Kevin Monroe. Kevin introduced me to Mike, and the rest is history. So I think my summary message here is, if we can live our life with an open mind and an open heart, these connections like Eunice and I and David, these just emerge from nowhere, because we find each other. Like, it's about energy, it's not about time. And I've been realizing more and more we need to be managing our energy, not our time, because this is becoming clearer and clearer to me.
I think somebody just put up your website.
Thank you very much.
Shuel just put up your website. Well done, Shuel. Thank you so much. And Barky, thank you for introducing me to this wonderful gentleman. The thing about this, Gary, is that I believe in laws of attraction. Every book about laws of attraction, you can wake me up in the middle of the night and ask me, what page do I find it? I'll tell you. But I believe the vibrations. I believe in the essence of giving, of self. Sometimes it's not the financial aspect of it, it's the emotional. We have been through so much, you've been through so much, and you are giving yourself. And what the world, the earth, is doing is that bringing people around you that have that kind of nurture that you have, the love, the passion that you have. And I think when we give ourselves, our vibrations tend to spread out. And that is what laws of attraction is all about. And you are from a whole different world. And you met Barky. And then you met Mike. And you met the lady that introduced. It's just how the world connects. But if you think negative all the time, in actuality, you will become pessimistic. Where is the growth?
100%. And I think that the most exciting thing about what you just described for me, Unisar, is so much of that growth doesn't have to cost a penny of money. It's about intention and energy. So after this wonderful conversation we're having today, if I could make an invitation for all of your listeners,
Please.
I would love to invite you to intentionally connect with 3 people next week that don't look or sound like you, or work in the same area as you. So you might be a nurse doing incredible work. Try and reach out to somebody that works in the local council that doesn't look like you. Maybe someone that works in a business that heads up human resources. It can be anything that's linked to what you care about or what you're passionate about. But go out of your way to meet and connect with people that don't look or sound like you. And that's the same for me. People that are Caucasian, people that are black. Like, this is not, I see colour. We are different colours. But it's not about the colour. It's about energy and impact and intention. And you'd be surprised how open and willing people are to want to have conversations like this. But it takes courage and it takes vulnerability.
That is
People do not connect. For me, people do not connect on a head level. People connect on an emotion and a heart level. You can connect on a head level, but that tends to be secondary for me. Like, if you and I found each other because of our hearts, not because of our heads.
Sure. See, David, I think David is having a hot, nice of coffee. So he forgot about the show. Now, Gary, the thing about not to just, you know, deviate from what we are saying, the thing is that I feel as though whenever we go through what we go through in life, you know, if we don't have, Varney was on the show. Varney also worked for Apple, a psychological accredited company. And what she said is that sometimes when we go through what we go through, it's good to just have a friend. I'm going to call Gary. And Gary and I have this conversation. Gary is just going to listen to me while I vent. And whenever Gary needs someone, Gary can just call me, Unisa, I need to talk. And the objective is just for me to listen, you know, and just give her the show that she need, give you the show that you need. There's nothing wrong with that. Or sometimes just draw a line in the middle of the paper, you know, what I've gone through today, the pros and the cons, the negative, and also what you're grateful for. And think about the grateful things, or forget about writing the negative. Just sit down and talk about the grateful things. I'm grateful to have my cat. I'm grateful to see another day. I'm grateful for having a job. Those little things make a difference because not everybody that have those things. Sometimes it's not just saying we're going to think out the box, like I told you, the way you think, Gary. So, as the show is coming to an end, Gary, unfortunately, I love to keep you for a longer period of time. I know you have given us some information on how to contact you, but if you can, and you have some people here that are just putting your information out here about your book, have courage. Find book at www.garyturner.live. So they're putting your information out there.
Thank you, everyone. You're so kind. I hope it's resonating.
Oh, Gary. Yeah, so I'm grateful, but still, if you can just vocalize it again to them, that would be deeply appreciated.
Well, firstly, thank you so much for being an incredible host. And David, thanks for your questions and reflection. Again, the website is Gary Turner, GARRYTURNER, GaryTurner.life, Life. My email is Gary, GARRY, at GaryTurner, one word, .life. You can find me on mainly LinkedIn and on Twitter. So you'll find me at Gary Interpersonal Catalyst on LinkedIn and Gary IP Catalyst on Twitter. And again, I think what you spoke to so beautifully for me, Unisar, that listening piece, this is something that's really important to practice. So I recently, if I may share briefly, I trained with a lovely lady called Jane Atshead Grant in the thinking environment by Nancy Klein. And it's one of the most impactful experiences I've ever had in my life around holding space, allowing other people to hear themselves think and verbalize it without judgment is one of the most freeing experiences I've ever had. So I'd love to also recommend, if you're interested in reading, Time to Think by Nancy Klein is an incredible read if you want to look at things around deep listening. Really, really incredible.
I don't want to let this gentleman go because initially when you came into the studio, I told you we're going to have a conversation. And the conversation that I want to lead into is not giving us ample time. So, and David have questions that he wanted to ask. So, being that David is not here, we're going to have you back on.
Yes. Very happy, very happy.
So, yeah, definitely. So, again, the podcast, Vulnerability, Value Through Vulnerability, comes out once a week. And just as a reminder, I'm an old man, Gary. You have to work with me. So the podcast is done every what?
Yeah, so we actually have, since we started with the Truly Human Conversations, which Unisar kindly joined us on episode 125. So if you go onto the Value Through Vulnerability podcast platform and look for episode 125, you'll hear this wonderful human in conversation with myself and Barke and Teresa. So we actually have 2 streams now. So yes, there's a weekly release every Monday. There's a new episode is released, and every other Thursday, a Truly Human Conversation is also released, of which Unisar was part of. So we're now deliberately running 2 separate streams. One which is a traditional development track, so CEOs, HR professionals, consultants. But now, following the response and my awareness raising, following the murder of George Floyd, Mike Vacanti and I are committed to making sure that these human conversations happen every 2 weeks for as long as we can get people to take part.
Excellent.
So if you're listening and you're really passionate to take part in that, we'd love to invite you on and share with you the frame for those conversations, because we need more black men on those conversations. We need more brown women. We need more people with disability. Every one of us matters, and we need all of those voices in the conversation.
I just love the word you just said. All of us matter. So whatever you have to say, as you stated, your famous quotation, the only thing is that you and I quote it differently. I use the word strive. I use the word thrive. We all have the right to be heard. We all have the right to strive, thrive. We all have the right to be seen. We all are human beings at the end of the day. The most important thing that matters in life is about being humane. Being humane. Now, the word is Human. Put a little E at the end. Makes a difference. We're all human, but being humane takes us that little leap. If you see someone that is in need of your service, of your help, help them. There's nothing wrong with helping someone. And the funniest thing about helping someone is that you're helping yourself. Deep down, we all have our past. You don't know what that individual have gone through. Nowadays, somehow have merged onto your path. The question you should ask yourself is, how and why have they merged onto my journey? There's a reason to everything, ladies and gentlemen. Do not ignore the essence of being humane. Give love, show love, support someone. Gary, as we come to an end, please, we would like for you to bring us to an end, because David is having his coffee.
I would just love to, honestly, thank you so much. It's been a real privilege of mine.
It's an honor.
To be with you. And I just want to leave with a really important point. As the Caucasian male on this conversation today, this conversation is deeply humane. Before the labels, before the fear, before the box ticking of how we identify or the colour of our skin. We are all human first, but I acknowledge and empathise with the challenges that we all have to work through together, but we can only do it together. So please reach out, let's connect, let's be part of the conversation together, because it's going to take all of us.
That is so. And let me just tell my favorite story, I promise, and we'll go. Gary is a little boy that was by the beach. The waves, I told you the story, the waves were sending onto the fishes onto the sand. Little boy picking up the fish and throwing it back in. The old man watching this little boy, which is Gary, throwing the fishes back in. The old man walked up to Gary and said, Gary, you're wasting your time and energy. The more you throw one in, 10 are coming back aboard. Gary bends down, picks up the fish, and throws one in. He said to the old man, I have just saved one. And the essence of this story is what he's doing through his podcast. He can reach one. If one can hear his podcast, that makes a difference to you. I applaud you, sir, and
Thank
thank you
you.
so much for being on the show.
Thanks you, and thanks everybody.
Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for watching the Mindful Session. We hope that you've gained something from it. We're all human beings. We all matter. You matter. Your well-being matter. Please continue to strive towards being humane and making a difference. Have a good week.